Happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Pat Cavlin here with a look at your forecast. We'll do a deep dive on what's going on here at home, the rest of the country, the tropics, lots to talk about here. Thankfully, things at home, though, are really quiet weather-wise. We got to 96 degrees today, almost at 95, 96 degrees today, just before 2 o'clock this afternoon, so a couple degrees above where we should be this time of year. Our normal high is 93, so we're close enough. That high temperature, though, again, notice the time. That came in before our storms began. I think we do see the storm chances come in a little earlier tomorrow, so that could keep the numbers down by maybe a couple of degrees, at least for a day or two before we start to trend drier towards the end of the week. 77, the wake-up temperature this morning. Our sunset today at 8:26. Again, soak it in this week because once we get to next week, that number starts to roll back. All right, coming up for the next few days, the storm chances will stick around. It's not a washout. I mean, if you notice today, we had a lot of sunshine for a really good part of the day. In fact, a lot of the day was really nice. And then we got these cooling downpours. And some of these storms did get feisty. You know, we can't rule out maybe a strong wind gust, maybe some small hail as well with the stronger storms. But that's pretty much the bulk of the intensity that we're going to see with this weather as we go through the next few days. This is the thing that I really want to point out to you, though. Look at the high temperatures today. We got to 96 in Houston. They almost got to the century mark in New York City. They got there, though, in Boston, in Philly, in D.C., so there's intense heat across the East Coast. You know, we're on the edge of it, but again, 96 is not out of the realm of possibility for us here in Houston during the month of June. And we're going to do this again for tomorrow. We'll get to 92 here in the city. Again, a couple degrees cooler with those earlier storms. But up and down the East Coast, you know, from New York to Atlanta, upper 90s again, a couple spots could get to the century mark. So more intense heat continues out across the East Coast while everybody else is seeing, you know, hot temperatures, but nothing crazy for the month of June. So what's going on? It's that area of high pressure, this heat dome, this ridge, whatever you want to call it. That area of high pressure is really putting a lid on rain chances along the East Coast. And it's also providing basically this lid of just hot, humid, stagnant weather. Again, up and down the East Coast from the Great Lakes all the way up towards Maine, down the Carolinas. And so what happens is since you can't get rain underneath these highs, you get these storms that form on the edge of these ridges. We call these ridge runners, but we also get them underneath the high as well. And that's our weather here. You get these storms developing and kind of bubbling up over the Gulf. They pick up that moisture from the Gulf. And so our storm chances remain in the scattered category at least through the next few days. So I think as we get into Wednesday, Thursday, rain chances will stay high. We'll keep them in the 60% range for tomorrow. We'll do 50% then as we get into Thursday. And then finally by Friday and the weekend, we start to trend towards much lower rain chances, more of the isolated variety. Still not going to be totally dry. I mean, you know, still keep an eye to the sky for the afternoon, but all in all, we're not going to see the coverage that we've seen here the last few days. So through the overnight tonight, storms wrap up. We stay muggy, we stay warm, temperatures 70s and 80s across the area. Getting into Wednesday, I think our storm chance will come more so in the morning and at least the first half of the afternoon. I'll show you that in future track in just a second. That's the only change here in the forecast is more of a morning focused, more of the first half of the day looks active for your Wednesday. And then Thursday, we're back to the afternoon and evening storm chances, similar to what we saw today and yesterday. So there's a snapshot of Wednesday morning. Notice spotty downpours, couple rumbles of thunder, not out of the question, from the coastal spots all the way up towards I-10. Could get it in the city as well. And I think that'll continue here through the morning hours up until about midday. There's 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. Notice areas to the west and to the north will stay dry until the afternoon. But even future track, it does not really showing a lot here as we get to the afternoon for those northern areas. So I think the rain chances tomorrow might be higher from the city points south, and then maybe more of a 30% chance as you go farther north. Now check this out getting into Thursday morning. Maybe a couple of storms well south and west, but overall, it's a pretty dry start. I think it's by the afternoon, similar to what we saw today, 1, 2, 3 o'clock, that we work back in that chance for a couple of widespread downpours, couple thunderstorms. That'll continue through the evening as well, and then we wrap things up getting into the evening. So there's your Wednesday forecast. Temperatures are going to struggle to heat up that first half of the day just because we'll see those downpours and thunderstorms. Obviously, areas that are away from the coast, places like Conroe, Huntsville, Brenham, up towards Navasota, if you're dry the first half of the day, you're going to spike into the 90s. But I think the city and coastal areas will probably stay in the 80s for a good part of the day. And then once we start to trend drier getting into the afternoon, that's when we're going to hit that high temperature into the lower 90s. So maybe a little bit of a later warm up getting into your Wednesday. All right, in the tropics, let's talk about this. Believe it or not, that system, that little area of interest that we were watching yesterday, even though the odds were at 40% by 10 p.m., something formed. And you could barely see it here on satellite, just that little swirl out here in the middle of the Atlantic, hundreds of miles away from Bermuda, thousands of miles away from us here in Houston. Tropical storm Andrea formed earlier this afternoon. Winds are sustained at 40 miles per hour. It means this is barely a tropical storm, and it's racing to the northeast at about 20 miles per hour. This is going to be a non-issue for us, I would say, within the next 12 hours. This thing's just going to fall apart here out in the Atlantic. The reason why is because there's a lot of wind shear. I mean, look at these winds ripping out of the northeast, right? So this wind shear is just going to tear Andrea apart. I mean, this storm to begin with is not impressive, and so typically these smaller, weaker storms, they just don't fare well with hostile conditions, and that's exactly what Andrea is going to encounter through the overnight. Across the rest of the Atlantic, from the west coast of Africa into the Caribbean, high concentrations of Saharan dust are moving through. In fact, I expect to see some of this higher concentration dust move into the Gulf and into the U.S. as we get towards the weekend and the start of next week, but that Saharan dust keeps things quiet for now. That's the Atlantic. Over the Pacific, it looks more active. We don't have any named storms out here right now, but this cluster of storms out here does still have a high chance of developing into something as we go through the next 5 to 7 days. So let's check it out on Future Track. Again, we start off with those cluster of storms. You can already get the sense of that little bit of a swirl down here as we get towards the weekend and next week. And I think we could get maybe at least a tropical storm developing close to the west coast of Mexico by the weekend and into the start of next week. So this is going to be near the areas that were just impacted by the last storm last week. So Acapulco all the way down towards southern Mexico, we could see more heavy rainfall, more flooding potential. But again, as long as things are busy on the eastern Pacific, we're going to stay quiet here. I mean, notice nothing in the Gulf, nothing in the Caribbean. Obviously, we had the Saharan dust, but again, we've talked about this. Whenever you get these storms that develop here in the Pacific, they produce a lot of wind shear. They produce a lot of exhaust, right? Especially if the storm becomes big enough. That exhaust materializes in the form of upper level wind shear. Well, that wind shear gets pulled into the Western Atlantic Basin, the Caribbean, the Gulf, and that really puts a limit on any potential development. So we're going to stay quiet here at home in terms of the tropics as we get into the beginning of July probably. All right, traveling for tomorrow. Hot temperatures again in the Northeast, 90s for Pittsburgh. 95 corridor, we could see temperatures challenging the century mark again. I do think afternoon storms are possible from D.C. to Philly, probably even into New York as well as a weak front starts to move in. Down to the southeast, hot, humid, mid to upper 90s for a lot of areas. A couple spotty storms from Atlanta to Charlotte down through Florida. Mid 80s in Miami will make that the coolest spot in the southeast tomorrow. As we look across the state of Texas, mid-80s for El Paso, couple showers here through West Texas. Midland hot in the mid-90s. We'll see a couple storms here in Houston in the low 90s. Kansas City, mid-90s for you with sunshine. Garden City, Kansas, breezy, 90 degrees. Chicago, a couple showers in the 80s. More rain chances here through the upper Midwest. Even a few storms, but look at how much cooler it is. 95 in St. Louis, but 70s from Minneapolis up towards Rapid City. Into the southwest, we're talking about 70s for San Francisco, low 70s for LA, 104 though in Phoenix with sunshine, 100 degrees for Vegas, 87 Salt Lake, and 80 in Denver with a couple storms. And then the Pacific Northwest, pretty quiet. Cool weather in Seattle with clouds, more sunshine in Medford and warmer temperatures, and then hot getting into Boise, out towards the Intermountain West with high temperatures in the 80s and 90s. Here at home tonight, humid, quiet, 77 degrees, your overnight temperature. Tomorrow we'll do 92 with a couple scattered storms, especially during the morning hours. Here's that 7-day forecast. We'll do scattered storms again for Thursday. Again, next 2 days will be the rainiest. And then for Friday into the weekend and the start of next week, we go towards more isolated chances. I think Friday and Saturday are mainly dry. Hot though, with high temperatures in the mid-90s. Remember, the Pride Parade and Festival is in downtown Houston this Saturday. A lot of people expected at that for the evening. Then more scattered to isolated storm chances for Sunday and Monday. But as we get into next week, it does look like we start to trend drier and hotter. High temperatures could get back to the upper 90s by the middle of next week. That's your forecast. Thanks for joining us here on KHOU 11 Plus. We'll have another look at your weather and your headlines coming up on the KHOU 11 News at 10, and I hope to see you there.